Alrighty, you guys. So today we're going to be talking about the carbon cycle. If you haven't gotten your packet, make sure you get it and make sure you staple it. Make sure your name and date is on it. So let's jump right into it. So the carbon cycle is talking about how the molecule of carbon is cycled throughout the environment. When we talk about carbon though, a lot of the times people think or assume that we're referring to carbon dioxide. However, that is not the case. That is just one version of carbon. So the first thing we're going to write down here is that carbon dioxide and methane, so this is methane, are just versions of carbon. And it's not really like a version, it's more like a compound that contains carbon. So when we talk about carbon here, we're talking about carbon a lot of the times with oxygen and carbon with hydrogen. So we're talking about methane and carbon dioxide. And these are both greenhouse gases. These gases live in the atmosphere and they cause the heating of the earth because they absorb heat. So that's what we call them, greenhouse gases. So the cool thing about the carbon cycle is that you can really start anywhere you want. I always like to start in the atmosphere and work my way around. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do, but you could start really anywhere you want. Now, if you have different colors, I suggest you grab some because it will help you keep track of what you're doing. So let's go ahead and start here in the atmosphere. So in the atmosphere, usually you can find carbon as carbon dioxide. And so we say CO2 is in carbon dioxide, is in the atmosphere. So we find carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and from here it can travel to different places. The first place that it can travel to is to the ocean, and this is through a process called diffusion. Okay, this allows CO2 to be absorbed by the ocean. Okay, and then it can also come back down here through a process called photosynthesis, which you guys are all familiar with. So through photosynthesis, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can end up in plants. And remember, plants don't just exist on land, they also exist in water. So it's not just plants, it's also water plants like algae. Okay, so once the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been absorbed by plants like algae and trees, we can then go to different places. So if it was absorbed by a tree, let's say the tree goes through what's called aerobic respiration. Or another way of saying this is cellular respiration, so I'll write that down. And all this means is that the plant is using the carbon to conduct cellular stuff, things, processes that are happening inside, and we'll talk about this later on. So by animals and plants. Okay, so it's gone here and then it goes right back into the atmosphere. Now let's say instead of it being used in the processes inside the cells, it actually gets trapped into one of the leaves and a cow or another herbivore comes by and starts feeding. Now that carbon ends up inside this cow or any other organism really. Now this cow might then die and become a fossil, okay? And so that would be through fossilization. And through fossilization, aka if the cow becomes a fossil, then that carbon becomes a fossil and is trapped down here. Now, important to point out to you guys, sorry, I just realized you guys can't see. When fossilization happens, it doesn't happen to every dead organism. It needs specific conditions to occur. So it needs the right amount of pressure and heat. Otherwise, it will not become a fossil. So if the carbon gets trapped under here as a fossil, then the only way we can get it back into the atmosphere is if we start to use fossil fuels and burn them. So that is called combustion. And that's the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, so when you burn fossil fuels, you're releasing the carbon back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Okay, so now let's go back and fill in the blanks. So, like I said, carbon can be in the atmosphere, enter the plants, and then from the plants, it can enter back into the atmosphere or enter into an animal, and then the animal can fossilize, and then the carbon will go back up. However, if let's say the animal is not breathing it out and it's not fossilizing, then it could also decompose. So that's decomposition. And through decomposition, the carbon will go back into the soil and then again can come back up in different ways. So decomposition of dead organisms by decomposers. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more detail here. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to highlight these to give you guys an idea of the big picture. So decomposition gets highlighted because that's a process. Diffusion gets highlighted because that's also another process. We also want to highlight photosynthesis and aerobic cellular respiration. So respiration, in this case, we're going to assume is just a breathing out of carbon dioxide, okay? Just for these purposes today. And then we have combustion as well. You guys can't see that. And then what I like to do is I come back down here and I highlight everything in the same color so that it matches up here. I'm going to go ahead and put this here for you so that you can copy this down onto your paper. I do want to point out that there is something we didn't talk about in the diagram, and that's deforestation. So I will talk about that now. I just want you to pause it first and copy this down so that you have it. And now let's talk about that deforestation. So deforestation is going to fit right here in your diagram. And deforestation is actually really bad. It's deforesting, meaning it's cutting down trees. So cutting down trees doesn't actually release carbon, but by cutting down trees, we then cut down on the amount of photosynthesis that's happening. So if you take away trees, the trees can't absorb carbon. So it actually causes the carbon to increase in the atmosphere. And so that's why we add deforestation right there, okay? All right, so I am going to go ahead and move on to the nitrogen cycle in a separate video to give you guys enough time to copy down this. Again, I will put this down here for you, and you will also want to add this into your notes, okay? Don't forget to answer the questions on the back of your poster when you are done.